The story of the journey of our congregation's vote in June 1999, it took a lot of turns. Now, many people planted seeds, others watered, some worked behind the scenes, and others waved the banner high. There is no calculating the worth of everyone's contribution. And it is interesting as we prepared for today's celebration, the stories that came out, the memories that were shared, and no one, we don't want to leave anyone out. We want to lift everyone up. And we want to thank you. So thank you, thank you, thank you to everyone. Thank you, thank you. Now, also, some storytellers, and I mean that in the best way. I would invite Bob Mundy and Reverend David Ragan, who were instrumental in this process. They would come up and they would share with us some of the open and affirming history and what it has meant to them. So please come up and let's welcome them. Okay. You're first. Why are you surprised?
Why are you surprised?
Okay, here you go. You're first.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning, Bob.
My name is Bob Mundy. I was on the Bringing Down the Walls task force 20 years ago, 21 years ago, actually, because we went through a one-year process of education and reflecting and moving forward. So proud to be here. I'm going to take a moment here to read a letter from our congregation president, Tom Lewis, who was the president at the time. They are unable to be here, but I'll read the letter from Tom verbatim. This is on the Shadow Rocks ONA 20-year celebration. Dear friends, I'm sorry Paige and I cannot be here to celebrate this milestone event, and humbled by Ken's invitation to share my memories of the process that led to Shadow Rock becoming an ONA congregation. It's hard to believe that 20 years have gone by since Shadow Rock courageously took the steps to open our hearts to the members of the GLBT community. Evolving into an ONA church would not have been possible without our already established ministries in equality, social justice, education, and community service. Shadow Rock led by example, as demonstrated by the church's members, the board, and our senior pastor at the time, David Ragan. The ONA process was a time of great reflection as a congregation and for me personally. That's Tom speaking, okay. At first, I wasn't sure I was the right person to lead Shadow Rock through this process. This topic opened raw emotions at the time, and as we began to explore the ONA process, we had some members opposed to any consideration. Why did God put me in this position? Gracefully, David provided me, the board, and our family of faith with great counsel and spiritual guidance as we undertook the journey. For me, the question became quite simple. How would I feel if anyone in my family wasn't welcome in my church? Would the institutional church reject my child simply on the basis of his or her sexuality? Despite our own questions and concerns about community perceptions, the board completed the process and voted to invite our Shadow Rock family of faith to become an ONA congregation. I was scared that Sunday morning 20 years ago when I stood before you knowing I was asking myself, my friends, and our faith community to open themselves to the enormous possibilities that an inclusive church could achieve. Was God going to speak through me today to share his vision and that of the board? Was Shadow Rock going to be openly confess that God's love and grace is meant for all his children. Members of the board and audience rose to speak in support and opposition to ONA, sharing how their opinions had evolved or not, and challenged Shadow Rock to demonstrate the tenets of our faith. As the official vote was announced, God's spiritual presence filled our hearts as a supermajority of this congregation supported becoming an ONA church. Affirming God's love was meant for all people. Sadly, some members left the Shadow Rock Church and chose another faith journey, their departure leaving a collective hole in our hearts. Yet, every day, my family is touched by our experience becoming ONA. When our youngest son came out many years later, he and our family experienced the unconditional love that being an ONA congregation offers this community. Shadow Rock has proven love has no bounds, and that God is always present. Thank you for the memories our family has of the process and this faith community. Blessings for all of God's grace upon you and your families. Tom. So that's Tom's reflection on our process and that challenging day 20 years ago. I'd like to just add a footnote here that for years before becoming ONA, Shadow Rock perceived itself to be welcoming to all. We were ONA before we were ONA. Our covenant that was so skillfully crafted by our founding ministers became the foundation for our movement forward. It was kind of like the Constitution or our Bill of Rights or what have you. It was the basis on which we moved forward and continued to put breath into who we are. So it's a great day. Let's celebrate. Thank you very much. David?
Thank you. It's been 13 years, I think, since I've been up here on a Sunday. Ken, I thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. I do just want to acknowledge that we are a gentle, angry people. Pretty much described what was going on for that year. There were some really gentle folk, and there were some really angry folk. And I know that's not unknown to any pastor who takes on a justice issue and holds it deep theologically. I also know that the whole covenant that you referred to was a biblical standard that really spoke to us. To say you radically affirm every life meant you radically affirmed every life. And if we weren't going to radically affirm every life, then we need to take it out of the covenant. So for me, it was a constitutional covenantal crisis, whatever you wanted to call it, and it was a theological crisis. What I just want to acknowledge is it's amazing to hear Tom's reflection. I've never talked with Tom about that, but Tom was instrumental to the entire process. I wish I could give you the whole history. What some people don't know is after we voted, and you all that were here on that part of that committee, would you raise your hands? I just want to acknowledge you. My gosh. I want to acknowledge how grateful I am. You guys did everything right. What I didn't do right was I didn't understand exactly how divisive this would be. I grew up in relationship to this church. I thought we all were inclusive. I didn't see this coming, that it would be divisive. So to lose about 80 to 100 members who were actually people I grew up with, a lot of them, and I'd known since I was a little boy, and they knew me since a little boy, was absolutely something that I will always regret, that I lost them. They were so important to my life. But I also know this church was what it was, and we are who we are, and it means that there's sacrifices to be made. What I don't think they knew was that after, and I don't know why I did this, we had a board meeting this last Sunday of June, the last week of June, and then we're on vacation. When I came back, there was a note, and many, many, many notes telling me that I was ruining the church, that there was 200 people organizing off campus ready to throw me out. And I said, well, y'all should come to on campus and throw me out. I mean, it's your church. You don't need to go off campus. And I wanted to dialogue with them, but the lines were drawn. It's kind of a precursor to where our country is today. The lines were drawn. There was no conversation. The committee did all they could to incorporate them in, but there was nobody willing to come to the table and talk. So the divisiveness was just absolutely painful. What I also know that is on the Sunday that we had what we called Covenant Sunday, Stewardship Sunday, I had a premonition that I was going to get attacked. And I don't know why I woke up at 2:30 in the morning thinking that. It's impossible. Nobody's ever been attacked in church. And lo and behold, on that first, I didn't understand why they invited this guest steward to be the guest steward. I'd known him since he was a little boy. I knew his father didn't like me anymore. And I didn't understand, because I don't think he ever gave a dime to the church. So I didn't know why he was actually speaking it that morning. But that's when he said in front of everybody that morning, and I was standing over here. Y'all weren't there. I understand as he talked, I got further and further over by the windows, that he said, my mother, who I knew, and I knew where she stood, and she would have been with us, but he said would be turning over in her grave because a family is between a man and a woman, male and female, children and grandparents. And I question the leadership of this church. This is when people were supposed to give to the church. And at that moment, I thought my day was over. That was the last Sunday of my career here. I sat down because, like, we have our conference minister here today, Bill. There was also Kelly Rogers-Whitty, and she was our guest preacher that day. And she said, "How are you, David?" And I said, "I'm so glad I'm not preaching." I don't know what happened, because I really thought that was the end. The leadership at that time under Tom was really taking the stance they needed to be neutral. They wanted to hear both perspectives. But what that means is I had the great group of informal leadership who were leading, but my formal leadership wasn't leading. And I was getting attacked, and I was okay with that. I didn't like it, but I was okay with that. But it was relentless. On that Sunday, what I thought was my last was transformational. So it's the worst Sunday of my life and the best Sunday of my life. Because that's when Tom and the leadership realized if that's what it is to be radically unaffirming, then we don't want to be like that. And that's the day that Tom began to change, and I truly mean that. All of a sudden, he stood up, and you heard he didn't want to. I wanted to say, Tom, and I know his son came out years later, but anybody that knew Garrett was not going to be straight. There just was no question about it. And I thought if everybody else voted no, there's one person who has to vote yes, and that's Tom. And he needs to get with it, and I couldn't say that to him. So when Tom stood up on that last Sunday that we voted and actually dared to say, and with tears in his eyes, we need to do this for our children, still gets me emotional. We need to do this for our church. I believe that without Tom and his leadership and the other leaders that were here, we would not be open and affirming today. And what's even more amazing to me is that I got a call about a month ago from Paige Lewis asking me, with Ken's permission, if I would do the marriage of Garrett to his partner. There's no way Garrett would be married in this church had y'all not voted to be open and affirming, and had he not led the way. I talk about a full circle. And do you know how many kids from this church, and nobody knew, were gay, are gay today, and proud, and have loving parents because they've gone through this? Even happened to me. You identify with so much of this, Ken, and I know. And I look at you and I feel a space in my heart for you as you continue to march out into the future. Being on the leading edge, doing that whole wedge blade thing is lonely, it's scary, it's not appreciated, but it's the only thing that bends history towards the arc of justice. And Ken, you're out there, and you're still taking on this issue, and I thank you for that. You continue to lead this church into areas that I don't think you all necessarily want to go to, but you know you have to, because that's what it is to be radically affirming. That's what it is to be about justice, peace, and love. You don't have a choice. You don't want a choice, but you don't have a choice. And Ken, I see what you're doing today, and I'm so much sitting back and wondering if I had the courage that you have, because what I see you doing is marching forward, and you're leading with leaders who have caught that vision. You all have the vision, and I tell you, there are few churches in this community like this one who's willing to walk the talk, who's willing to put your faith on the line, who's willing to put family and friends on the line. A lot of you lost families. We lost over 100 people, over $100,000 in pledges that I could estimate. And yet we broke even, and we grew. It isn't all about size. It was about heart. And our heart grew exponentially. And when folk later on walked into this church, they felt the love and the compassion. That's the day we became open and affirming, not the vote. So Ken, I want to just thank you for your continued courageous leadership, all of you who are marching in the way of defending immigrant rights. Ken, you don't need to do what I did, is take on a justice issue and then over-identify with it and be gay. But I know you have an immigrant's heart. It's not as easy as it looks. And, but I thank you so much, and to know that this is an inclusive church today and a justice-seeking church today. You are that shining light. You are that beacon on the hill. And I thank you for not covering it and continue to shine it out. To all of you that were here on that Sunday, don't check my facts. Everybody I knew who was in favor of this was on vacation. Everybody. Again, idiot. Put it on the last Sunday of June. Everybody's gone. Where we normally had 400 in attendance, there was normally 200. On that Sunday, I swear, don't check this, 600 people filled up this sanctuary, and I didn't recognize anyone. And I thought we were sacked. I thought it was over, and I know the rest of you who were here, you're looking around going, who are these people? I knew that happened on Christmas and Easter, but I didn't think it was going to happen this Sunday. I thought we were going down, and we were going down hard. But what I learned is this church is such a beacon of light that the Christmas and Easter folk who I kind of dismissed, they're out there, and they hear you, and they're watching you, and you're speaking for them, and you're leading for them, and it matters to them. And they showed up that Sunday, and they were amongst those, because we let everybody vote, even by mail ballot. Anybody could vote. Everybody came out 90% across the board, including those Christmas and Easter folk who were there that Sunday. Everybody. That, to me, told me this church matters more than you guys will ever know. And I thank you for making that the case all the way to this day and into the future. Keep fighting the fight. Keep spreading the love. Keep standing for love. And keep loving. Thank you.